The stars over Tivan Prime were calm, but the people living under them felt no peace. For many years, the Tivan Alliance had lived in comfort, believing their fleet strong enough to guard every border. Their cities shone with bright towers, their trade routes reached across the sector, and their councils believed war was a problem for others. But that belief ended when the Zarkon swarm appeared. The Zarkon did not come with diplomacy or warning. Their ships entered the systems like shadows, and every world they touched fell into silence. Colonies once filled with music and life became graves. The Tivans tried to resist. Their navy formed brave lines against the invaders, but the Zarkon fought without fear. They never surrendered, and their numbers seemed endless. One fleet was destroyed, then another, until the council could no longer count victories, only losses. Counselor Vera sat in the great hall of glass, staring at the stars through a wide window. She had grown up believing the alliance was secure. Now she listened to reports of burning colonies and retreating fleets. Her people begged for protection, yet she had nothing left to give them. The council chambers that once echoed with debate now felt heavy with despair. On that night, she stood and addressed the few leaders who still remained. "We can no longer hold this alone. Our fleets are broken. Our colonies are falling. We must send a call for aid beyond our borders. If no one answers, then our people will be lost." The chamber fell silent. The Tivans had always believed in self-reliance. Asking for help from outsiders felt like shame. Yet shame was better than extinction. Slowly, the council agreed. They would broadcast a wide-range distress call, not to one ally, but to every corner of the galaxy. Whoever could hear it, friend or stranger, would know of their need. The technicians worked through the night, across the comm arrays of Tivan. Prime, the signal was prepared. When it was ready, Counselor Vera herself spoke the words. "This is the Tivan Alliance. We face destruction from the Zarkon swarm. Our fleets are failing. Our colonies burn. To any who can hear this, we call for aid. We will welcome any who come, for without help, we will fall." The message repeated again and again, sent out on every frequency, pushed into deep space. Then the Tivans waited. Days passed, then weeks. Fleets from the Alliance pulled back to defend their capital, while colonies beyond the border were left to their fate. The council met often, but every session ended with fewer voices, for some leaders abandoned their posts to save their families. Others lost hope entirely. Still, Vera returned to the hall each day, asking the technicians if there was any reply. Each time they shook their heads. The great stars gave no answer. Then, one cycle later, a young officer ran into the chamber with wide eyes. "Counselor, we have received a signal. It comes from beyond the Eastern Rim. It is not Zarkon, not one of our allies. It is something else." The council gathered at once as the signal played through the speakers. A deep voice, steady and calm, spoke in clear words. "This is Admiral Rowan of the human fleet. We have heard your call. We know of the Zarkon threat. We come to answer." The chamber erupted in confusion. The word human spread from mouth to mouth. Few Tivans had ever heard of the species. Rumors said they came from a dangerous world where storms, beasts, and disease shaped them into survivors unlike any other. Some called them Deathworlders, a name spoken with both fear and awe. "Counselor," Vera listened closely to the message. It did not promise victory. It did not boast of power. It simply said they would come. That simplicity struck her more deeply than any grand speech could. When the message ended, the council argued. Some leaders warned that inviting humans was a mistake. "They are dangerous," one said. "If they come, they may conquer what the Zarkon leave behind." Another added, "We do not know their ways. They may bring more trouble than hope." but Vera lifted her hand. We asked for aid, and they answered. No one else has come. Would you turn them away because of fear? Fear has already brought us close to defeat. Perhaps it is courage that will save us. The chamber fell into silence again. At last, the council agreed. The humans would be welcomed. Weeks later, the watch stations around Tivan Prime detected massive energy signatures. Space itself trembled as new ships emerged from jump space. The humans had arrived. From the surface, the people of Tivan Prime looked up and saw the sky darken with shapes of iron and fire. Their ships were vast, scarred from countless battles, their hulls heavy with weapons no Tivan mind could fully understand. The fleet looked more like a storm than an army. The people whispered in fear. Were these saviors or conquerors? Hope and dread mixed together in every heart. Counselor Vera stood at the window once more, watching the fleet spread across the stars. Her people had called for aid, and the Deathworlders had come. Now the question remained, would their arrival bring salvation or something far more dangerous? The first sight of the human fleet left the Tivans speechless. Ships larger than anything in their archives glided through the void. Their hulls were dark, covered with scars of old battles, and lined with weapons that glowed faintly as if they held storms within. Some Tivans whispered that the ships looked alive, like predators circling in silence. Others felt a strange relief, believing that such giants might finally stand against the Zarkon swarm. Counselor Vera stood at the grand observatory, her eyes fixed on the sky. She had expected help, but not this. The human fleet spread wide across the orbit of Tivan Prime, each ship moving in perfect coordination, as if every vessel knew the thoughts of the others. It was not the display of weak allies. It was the march of seasoned warriors. Inside the council chamber, the air was heavy with unease. Leaders gathered around the great table, waiting for the humans to speak. When the signal came through, a tall figure appeared on the screen. His face was marked with age and calm strength. His eyes were steady, his voice clear. I am Admiral Rowan of the United Human Fleet. We heard your call. We know of the Zarkon threat. We are here to help. But understand this. When humans fight, we fight to win. The battles ahead will be long and costly. We ask only for your trust and your will to stand beside us. The words carried weight. He did not speak with pride or arrogance. He did not promise easy victory. He spoke like one who had walked through fire many times and expected to do so again. The Tivans exchanged nervous glances. Some nodded slowly, while others shrank back in fear. Counselor Vera stepped forward. Admiral Rowan, we welcome you to our world. We have little left to give, but our people will stand beside you. You will find no betrayal here, only desperation and hope. Rowan inclined his head slightly. Then we will fight together. The council ended the transmission, but the chamber remained restless. One leader whispered, They look more like conquerors than allies. Another muttered, Their ships could flatten our cities if they wished. Have we traded one danger for another? Vera raised her hand. We asked for aid. These are the only ones who came. Whatever fear they bring, it is less than the fear of extinction. Let us judge them by their deeds, not their shadows. Outside, the people of Tivan Prime filled the streets, gazing upward at the new arrivals. Children pointed at the glowing shapes in the sky, while elders murmured old stories of Deathworlders. Farmers, merchants, and soldiers alike felt the same storm of emotions, fear of the unknown, and hope that maybe, just maybe, the tide of war could change. Soon the humans began to land. Their transports descended with thunder, setting down on the open plains near the capital. From them stepped figures unlike any Tivan soldier. The humans wore heavy armor, plates dark as night, marked with strange symbols. Their weapons gleamed with power, each larger than a Tivan could lift. They moved with discipline, every step, measured, every motion calm, as if they had done this countless times before. The Tevans lined the landing fields to watch. Some gasped at the sheer size of the humans, taller and stronger than most of them. Others looked at their weapons with unease. A few even turned away, too afraid to watch. But one small moment changed many hearts. A frightened Tevan child had slipped from the crowd, stumbling near the soldiers. The people shouted for the child to return, fearing the humans' reaction. Instead, one soldier knelt down, lowering his weapon, and extended his hand gently. His armored glove looked rough and heavy, yet his voice was soft. The child hesitated, then took his hand. The soldier lifted the child safely back to the crowd. A quiet murmur spread among the Tevans, a whisper that perhaps the humans were not only warriors, but also protectors. Later that night, Admiral Rowan requested a meeting with the council in person. The Tevans watched with quiet tension as he entered the chamber. He wore no armor, only a dark uniform marked with silver lines. His presence filled the room, not with force, but with certainty. "We will defend your world," he said. "But understand, we do not fight cautiously. We strike hard, and we strike until the enemy breaks. The Zarkon will not retreat from words. They only understand strength. If you stand with us, you must be ready for battles unlike any you have known." The council sat in silence. They had always fought with careful plans, measured lines, and slow retreats. To hear Rowan speak of relentless war shook them deeply. Yet Vera leaned forward. "Then teach us. Show us what it means to endure as you do." Rowan studied her, then gave a slight nod. "Very well. Tomorrow, you will see what it means." When the meeting ended, the leaders left with uneasy thoughts. Some feared they had brought a storm into their home. Others began to feel a spark of hope that had long been absent. Outside, the human fleet floated above the world like silent guardians, their dark hulls glowing faintly against the stars. The Tevans did not yet know if these Deathworlders would save them or reshape them. But one truth was clear. With the arrival of the human fleet, the war had already changed. The sky of Tevan Prime no longer belonged only to fear. It now carried the weight of iron and the promise of fire. The landing fields outside the capital city became a place of constant whispers. Every day, more human soldiers arrived, walking down the ramps of their heavy transports in disciplined lines. Their armor gleamed dark in the sun, their weapons rested easily in their hands. To the Tevans, they looked less like soldiers and more like hunters ready for prey. Crowds gathered to watch, but the air was heavy with unease. The Tevans had fought wars before, but never beside beings who carried themselves like predators. The humans did not move nervously, nor did they glance around for safety. They walked with calm purpose, as if the world beneath their boots already belonged to them. Counselor Vera noticed the fear in her people. From balconies above the landing grounds, she saw citizens step back when humans passed too near. Merchants whispered of what Deathworlders might do once the war was over. Mothers pulled their children close, warning them not to stare. The humans, however, showed no anger. They set up camps with perfect order, their tents and vehicles forming neat rows. Their engineers worked late into the night, constructing strange towers that hummed with energy. Their medics opened clean white stations, prepared not only for their own wounded, but also for Tevan soldiers. Still, the Tevans struggled to trust. One morning, a group of Tevan soldiers was brought to train alongside the humans. Among them was young officer Lyra. She had volunteered when most hesitated. Though nervous, she wanted to understand the allies who had come to save them. The training field was wide, marked with banners of both alliances. Human instructors stood ready, tall figures in simple uniforms. One of them raised his voice. "We fight together now. You will see how we move and you will learn. Watch carefully. The humans demonstrated first. They marched forward, split into squads, and raised their weapons with flawless precision. Their rifles cracked with thunder, striking distant targets with perfect aim. Not one soldier stumbled, not one line broke. To the Tivans, it looked less like practice and more like a storm made of flesh and steel. When it was the Tivans' turn, they did their best. But their lines bent when the pace quickened. Their shots missed the targets. They grew tired while the humans moved on without pause. Some Tivan soldiers whispered in shame, believing they could never stand beside such warriors. Lyra felt the same fear, but when she glanced at the humans, she noticed something strange. They were not mocking. They were not angry. One human instructor even stepped forward, guiding a Tivan soldier's hands gently to steady his aim. His voice was calm, almost encouraging. Lyra realized then that the humans did not see them as weak. They saw them as allies who needed time to grow. Still, fear remained strong in the capital. That evening, as the training ended, Lyra walked through the city streets. She heard the voices of citizens around her. "They fight like beasts," one elder whispered. "If they turn on us, who will stop them?" another asked. "We may defeat the Zarkon, only to lose our freedom," said a third. Lyra kept walking, her heart heavy with doubt. She wanted to believe the humans had come as friends, but the fear of her people weighed on her. The next day, the humans marched through the city in a show of strength, moving toward the spaceport. Citizens lined the streets, some watching in silence, others hiding in their homes. The sound of their boots echoed like thunder through the wide avenues. Children clung to their parents. Many looked away, afraid to meet the humans' eyes. But then, something happened that changed the moment. A small child, no older than 5, slipped free from the crowd. He stumbled forward, right into the marching path of the human soldiers. Gasps filled the air. Parents shouted in fear, certain the child would be crushed or ignored. The lead soldier stopped instantly. His squad halted with perfect discipline. Slowly, he knelt down, setting aside his massive weapon. His armored hands looked sharp and dangerous, yet his movements were gentle. He reached out, steadying the child who had fallen. Then, in a soft voice that carried warmth, he said something the Tivan crowd understood even through the translator. "You are safe." The soldier rose and guided the child back to his family. For a moment, the entire street was silent. Then a quiet murmur spread. The Deathworlders had shown kindness, not rage, not indifference. Lyra, who stood among the watching soldiers, felt her fear ease just slightly. She saw the looks on the faces of her people change too. The humans were still frightening. Their ships still loomed above the world like shadows. But now, behind the armor and the weapons, the Tivans saw something else. That night, Counselor Vera met with Admiral Rowan once more. She spoke honestly. "My people fear you. They whisper that you are more dangerous than the Zarkon. But today, they also saw compassion. Perhaps in time, fear will give way to trust." Rowan answered in his steady voice. "Fear is natural. We are strangers. We are different. But we did not come to rule. We came because you called, and because we know what it means to fight for survival. Trust does not come quickly, but it will come if we earn it." Vera looked at him closely and saw no arrogance, only certainty. She nodded slowly. "Then let us take the first steps together." Above Tivan Prime, the human fleet circled in silence. On the ground, their soldiers trained beside Tivans, walked through wary streets and showed small moments of kindness. Fear still lingered, but now it shared space with something else. Hope that perhaps these Deathworlders, feared across the stars, had come not only with iron and fire, but with the strength to stand beside them. The warning came at dawn. From the outer colonies, broken signals reached Tivan Prime. Delros, A mining world on the edge of Alliance space was under attack. The Zarkon swarm had arrived in force, pouring from the void in endless numbers. The Tivan Council gathered in panic, voices sharp with fear. Delros was undefended except for a small garrison. If the swarm took it, they would have another base from which to strike deeper into Alliance territory. Counselor Vera looked across the chamber at Admiral Rowan. The human commander stood calm, hands folded behind his back, his eyes fixed on the star map. The Zarkon symbols spread across the screen like a dark tide. "We must act quickly," Vera urged. "If Delros falls, others will follow." Rowan nodded. "We move now. Our fleet is ready. We will not wait for the enemy to strengthen." His certainty silenced the room. For the first time in many sessions, the Council felt that someone carried no doubt. Within hours, the human fleet prepared to jump. Several Tivan ships joined them, though their crews trembled at the thought of charging headlong into the swarm. When the jump finished, the defenders of Delros saw hope appear in the sky. Vast human warships emerged, their hulls glowing faintly with shield energy. Smaller Tivan cruisers followed behind, forming an uneasy but determined line. The Zarkon were already there, their twisted ships swarming over the planet like insects. Black holes flashed with cruel light as they rained fire on Delros's surface. Mines and cities burned below, sending desperate distress signals upward. Admiral Rowan gave the order. "All ships, advance, strike hard, strike fast, drive them back." The humans moved with shocking speed. Their battleships unleashed torrents of fire that lit up the void. Beams of white energy tore through the swarm, shredding enemy ships in bursts of light. Missiles streaked like falling stars, finding their targets with deadly precision. The Tivans had never seen such firepower. Their own ships fired as well. But it was the humans who carried the weight of the assault. The Zarkon, unafraid, surged to meet them. Wave after wave slammed into the human line, clawing at shields, ramming against armor. The Tivans gasped as several human ships vanished in flame, but still the line held. The humans did not retreat, not even an inch. They answered every strike with two of their own. On the ground of Delros, human transports descended through clouds of fire. Armored soldiers poured out, their boots striking the dirt with thunder. They formed walls of steel around the surviving Tivan garrison. Officer Lyra, stationed with her unit, saw the Deathworlders in action for the first time against the enemy. The Zarkon ground forces were monstrous, insect-like creatures with claws that could tear through metal. They charged in endless numbers, screeching as they threw themselves at the defenders. Tivan soldiers raised their rifles, but many faltered, fear freezing their aim. The humans did not falter. They advanced in unbroken lines, rifles roaring, heavy weapons sending waves of fire into the swarm. Their armor turned aside blows that would have ended a Tivan life. Their voices carried through the storm, calm and commanding, guiding one another with sharp precision. Lyra felt her own fear shrink as she fought beside them. A human soldier stood near her, firing steady bursts, never wavering. When her weapon jammed, he stepped forward without hesitation, shielding her with his own body until she recovered. His actions were not those of a conqueror. They were those of a comrade. The battle raged for hours. The sky above was filled with burning wrecks. The ground shook with endless waves of assault. Yet slowly, the tide began to turn. The Zarkon, so confident in their endless numbers, met something they had never faced before. Enemies who did not break. The humans fought with a stubborn fire, refusing to yield even when outnumbered, even when wounded. At last, the swarm began to falter. Ships pulled back into the void, leaving their fallen behind. On the ground, the insect creatures screeched and retreated into the shadows. For the first time in years, the Zarkon abandoned a battlefield. A cheer rose from the Tivan. Defenders. They could hardly believe what they had seen. Victory had come, not through retreat or desperate defense, but through overwhelming strength. As the smoke cleared, Admiral Rowan's fleet held the skies. On the ground, human and Tyvan soldiers stood together, bloodied but alive. Officer Lyra looked at the humans with new eyes. They were terrifying in battle, yes, but their terror was not turned against allies. It was a shield, a storm unleashed only on those who threatened survival. When the fleet returned to Tivan Prime, the people welcomed them as heroes. Yet fear still lingered. Citizens whispered about the humans' brutality in war. Their ships looked like monsters. Their soldiers moved like predators. But whispers of hope grew louder too. For the first time, the Tivans had seen the swarm retreat. Counselor Vera stood once more at the great window of glass. The stars looked a little brighter now. She knew the humans brought fear, but she also knew they had brought something the Tivans had nearly lost, belief that the war could still be won. The victory at Delros gave the Tivans something they had not felt in years: hope. For the first time, the Zarkon had been forced to retreat. Yet even in celebration, the Tivans knew the truth. Without the humans, the battle would have been lost. Their allies had carried the fight with power and discipline the Tivans could not match. Counselor Vera understood this well. In the council chamber, she turned to Admiral Rowan. "We are grateful for what you have done, but we cannot always hide behind your strength. If we are to endure, we must learn to fight as you do." Rowan's steady gaze moved across the room. "You are correct. The Zarkon will not stop. They will return, and next time they may come in even greater numbers. If you wish to survive, you must change how you fight. You must be ready to think as we do, to act as we do." The words unsettled many leaders. The Tivans had always fought, with order and caution. They relied on planned lines, on careful retreats, on protecting life above all else. To fight like humans meant something different. It meant embracing risk, meeting danger head-on, and refusing to yield even in hopeless moments. Some council members argued against it, calling such methods reckless, but Vera saw no other choice. "If we do not adapt," she said, "we will not live to keep our traditions." And so the training began. On the plains outside the capital, human instructors gathered groups of Tivan soldiers. Among them was Officer Lyra, who had fought at Delros and returned with both scars and determination. She stood in line with her fellow Tivans, waiting as the humans explained their ways. The first lesson was movement. The Tivans had always marched in tight lines, believing strength came from staying close together. The humans broke them into smaller squads, teaching them to move with speed, to shift like water around obstacles. "A wall can break," a human sergeant explained, "but a river flows around stone." At first the Tivans stumbled. They lost formation, shouted in confusion, and found themselves surrounded in the drills. But slowly, as the days passed, they began to understand. Small groups could strike quickly, vanish into cover, and return where the enemy least expected. The second lesson was the use of terrain. The Tivans were used to fighting on open ground, keeping their soldiers visible for coordination. The humans did the opposite. They vanished into forests, crouched in ruins, and turned hillsides into traps. When Lyra's unit practiced ambush tactics with them, she saw how a small force could defeat a larger one through surprise. "You must not fight where the enemy is strongest," the instructor said. "You fight where they are weakest, and you force them into places they do not want to go." The third lesson was endurance. Human training pushed the Tivans beyond what they thought possible. Long marches with heavy packs, sleepless nights filled with drills, endless runs across rough ground. Many Tivans nearly gave up, but when they looked at the humans, who carried twice the weight and kept moving without complaint, they found strength. They did not know they had. Lyra herself struggled often. Her legs ached, her lungs burned, and her arms shook when holding her weapon for too long. But each time she wanted to stop, She remembered the soldier who had shielded her at Delros. She remembered his calm strength, his refusal to falter. And so she kept moving. The lessons were hard, and many Tyvans grumbled that the humans were changing them too much. Yet slowly, results began to show. In training battles, Tivan squads began to outmaneuver their human partners, using speed and creativity to surprise even the instructors. The humans nodded with approval. "You are learning," they said. Admiral Rowan visited the training grounds often. He spoke little, but he watched everything. When a Tivan squad completed a perfect ambush drill, he finally said, "Good. You begin to understand. Strength is not only in weapons, but in how you think. The Zarkon believe numbers alone will win. We will show them they are wrong." Beyond the military, the lessons spread to the people. Human engineers showed Tivan builders how to fortify cities with hidden defenses. Human medics shared methods of treating wounds quickly, even in harsh conditions. Farmers listened as humans explained how they had once survived on a world filled with storms and drought. The Tivans began to realize that survival was not only about fighting, it was about refusing to give up no matter the hardship. Still, some Tivans feared what these changes meant. Elders whispered that their culture was being replaced by the harsh ways of Deathworlders, but others began to see it differently. "We are not becoming human," Lyra told her comrades one night around the training fire. "We are learning to endure. We are learning what it means to survive. That is not the loss of who we are. It is the only way we can remain who we are." Her words spread quietly among the soldiers, giving them courage. By the end of the season, the Tivans were no longer the same people who had begged for rescue. They had tasted victory, endured brutal training, and learned lessons born from a world far harsher than their own. They were not yet equals to the humans, but they were no longer helpless. Counselor Vera stood with Admiral Rowan on the walls of the capital one evening, watching the stars. "You have given us more than strength," she said. "You have given us a way to hope again." Rowan answered simply, "Hope is the first step. Now we must turn it into action." Far beyond those stars, the Zarkon were gathering again, preparing their next assault. This time, however, they would not face the same broken enemy. They would face Tivans who had learned the lessons of survival, and humans who had sworn never to yield. The time for training had ended. The Zarkon swarm had retreated, but they were gathering once more, preparing to strike deeper into Alliance space. Counselor Vera and Admiral Rowan knew that the next battle would decide the future of the Tivan. Alliance. There would be no more waiting. On the deck of the largest human battleship, Rowan looked out at the Tivan fleet assembled alongside his own. For the Tivans, the sight of so many ships united was both inspiring and terrifying. Though they had trained hard, many soldiers still doubted their abilities. Their fleet was smaller, their weapons weaker, and their nerves were tested by the looming presence of Deathworlder allies. Lyra stood among the Tivan officers, her heart pounding. She had trained tirelessly with the humans and had survived the battle at Delros. But this offensive was different. The human strategy was bold, risky, and required full trust. The Tivan ships would move alongside the humans into Zarkon territory. Striking at the heart of the swarm, Admiral Rowan's voice came over the fleet comms, calm and commanding. "Remember your training. Stay with your squads. Move quickly. Do not hesitate. The Zarkon will expect caution. We give them none. Strike with all you have, and do not stop until they break." As the fleet jumped into Zarkon space, a strange silence filled the stars. Then, in the distance, the enemy appeared. Black hulls stretched across the void like a tide of shadow, thousands of ships moving in tight formations. The Tivans felt a chill, but Rowan's presence reminded them that fear was not weakness. It was a signal to act with purpose. The battle began suddenly. Human warships surged forward, cutting through the enemy lines with precision. Their weapons, unleashed streams of energy that ripped the Zarkon apart. The Tyvans followed, firing with careful timing, learning to move not as individuals, but as part of a larger force. On the ground of the Zarkon homeworld, human and Tyvan dropships descended, deploying soldiers into hostile terrain. Lyra led her unit alongside a squad of humans. The air was filled with the roar of engines, the smell of ozone from energy weapons, and the screeching of Zarkon creatures. The ground shook with every strike. The Zarkon did not retreat. They fought fiercely, their numbers pressing hard against the invaders. But the humans and Tyvans fought with something new: cohesion. Where the Tyvan soldiers had once broken under pressure, they now moved with strategy. They flanked enemy units, used terrain to their advantage, and followed the humans' signals with speed. Lyra remembered the lessons from training: the ambushes, the flexible formations, the endurance drills. She led her unit through a narrow canyon, surprising a large group of Zarkon soldiers. Together with the humans, they held the line, preventing the enemy from overwhelming the main force. In space above, the battle raged as well. Human cruisers moved in deadly coordination, striking from unexpected angles. Tyvan ships learned to anticipate the movements, firing in synchronization with their allies. Each Zarkon ship destroyed weakened the morale of those behind it. Slowly, the tide turned. Hours passed. The void was littered with wreckage, burning hulls and debris. Yet the Alliance forces pressed on. Rowan's strategy was relentless: pressure the Zarkon from multiple fronts, allow no pause, and force them into retreat. The Zarkon leaders, unaccustomed to such endurance, began to falter. Lyra's unit faced a sudden counterattack. A wave of Zarkon creatures charged from a cliffside, faster and stronger than any they had encountered. For a moment, fear gripped her soldiers. But the humans moved forward without hesitation, forming a shield line, their rifles firing steady volleys. Lyra followed their lead, shouting commands, and together they drove the enemy back. By the end of the battle, the Zarkon were forced to retreat entirely. Their numbers were shattered, and their morale broken. For the first time, the Alliance forces had struck deep into enemy territory and survived. The human fleet held the skies, and the Tyvan soldiers on the ground looked around at the ruined battlefield, exhausted but victorious. Back on the command ship, Counselor Vera and Rowan observed the aftermath. "We did it," Vera said softly. "The Zarkon will think twice before returning." Rowan nodded. "This victory is important, but remember, it is not the end. The Zarkon will rise again. What matters is that your people have learned to endure, to fight, and to survive alongside us. That is what will carry you through the next battles." Lyra, watching from her unit on the planet, felt a surge of pride. She had seen the humans in action again, fierce and unyielding, but also willing to protect and guide her. She realized that fear had not disappeared, but it had changed. It was no longer a force to paralyze them. It was a reminder of the stakes, a tool to sharpen courage. As the stars of the Zarkon system burned around the wreckage of their enemies, the Alliance forces regrouped. Ships moved to recover the wounded, secure the territory, and prepare for what might come next. For the Tyvans, this great offensive had not only destroyed the enemy, it had transformed them. The humans had brought fear to their enemies, but they had also brought hope to allies. And in that hope, the Tyvan people found strength they had never known before. The stars above Tivan Prime were calm once more, but the world beneath them had changed forever. The Zarkon had been pushed back, their swarm shattered in the great offensive. Yet victory did not bring rest. The people of the Alliance knew that. This war could return at any moment. And still, hope now burned where only fear had lived before. Counselor Vera walked through the streets of the capital, watching her citizens. Soldiers returned from battle, some with scars, some with tales of courage that would be told for generations. Civilians emerged from shelters, their faces still pale but smiling, learning to trust the protection the human fleet offered. People whispered about the Deathworlders, the humans who had come to save them. Fear remained, yes, but so did gratitude and respect. Officer Lyra stood on the landing field, watching the human soldiers as they prepared to depart. Many had grown close during the battles. She remembered the first day they had arrived, the fear that gripped her and her comrades, the hesitation to trust beings so strange and powerful. And now she saw those same humans walking among the Tyvans, laughing with soldiers, helping civilians, sharing lessons, and yet still carrying the aura of warriors who had survived countless battles. Admiral Rowan approached, his calm presence steady as always. "Your people have grown strong," he said. "They have learned not only how to fight, but how to endure. That is the difference between survival and defeat. Remember it." Lyra nodded. "We could not have done this without you. You showed us how to be strong, even when everything seems lost." Rowan's gaze swept across the field. "Strength alone is not enough. It is courage, discipline, and the will to act together that changes the outcome. Today you have seen it, and tomorrow you will carry it further." The people of Tyvan Prime watched as the human fleet hovered above. Some marveled at the immense ships, their weapons and engines still glowing faintly from the battle. Others whispered nervously about the sheer power concentrated in their presence. Both fear and admiration swirled through the crowds. But the Tyvans now understood something important. These Deathworlders, terrifying as they were in battle, had come, not to dominate, but to stand beside them. Counselor Vera called a gathering in the central hall. She addressed the leaders of the city and the military. "We have seen the strength of the humans. We have fought with them and survived. Some among you still fear their presence, but let us not forget the choice we made to call for aid. That choice saved us. Fear is natural, but hope is the gift they have brought. We must take it and use it wisely." The leaders listened, some still uneasy, but many inspired. The words rang true in every heart. Fear would not vanish completely. It never did. But hope could grow alongside it, and that hope would guide them through the trials ahead. In the days following the Great Offensive, human instructors continued to train the Tyvan soldiers. They shared tactics, taught strategies for battle, and even trained civilians in basic survival. Markets reopened, schools resumed, and the hum of life returned to the capital. For the first time in years, Tyvan children played in the streets, without fear of sudden attack. Lyra walked among them one afternoon, watching a group of children mimic the drills she had learned. They laughed and ran, unaware of the sacrifices made to protect them. She felt a warmth in her chest, knowing that survival was not just for soldiers or leaders. It was for every soul under the stars. At night, Vera and Rowan stood together on the observation deck of the council hall. The sky was filled with stars, some of them reflecting the fires of distant battles, others shining quietly like promises. "You have given us more than protection," Vera said. "You have given us a lesson in courage and resilience. Our people will remember this always." Rowan nodded. "We have also learned from you. The Tyvans have heart, creativity, and the willingness to change. That is what makes you strong, and what will allow you to endure whatever comes next." The humans would remain in the Alliance space for a time, helping to fortify planets and share knowledge, but eventually their fleet would leave. The Tyvans would face future battles on their own, yet they were no longer the same people who had sent out a desperate call. They had learned to stand, to fight, and to survive. As the fleet prepared to depart, the citizens of Tyvan Prime gathered to watch. The ships glimmered against the night sky, moving in silent formation. Children waved, soldiers saluted, and elders bowed their heads in respect. Fear had not vanished, but it was balanced now by hope, courage, and gratitude. Officer Lyra watched the departing humans, feeling both pride and sorrow. Pride for what they had achieved together, and sorrow that these allies, so fierce and kind, would leave. She remembered their lessons, their discipline, and their compassion. She knew that the strength they had shared would remain in her people forever. When the last ship disappeared into jump space, Vera turned to her council. We called for aid and we received it. It came with fear, yes, but also with hope. That hope is ours now. Let us hold it, nurture it, and let it guide us through whatever darkness may come. And under the stars of Tivan Prime, for the first time in many years, the people looked not only toward survival, but toward a future where courage and hope could endure. The Deathworlders had brought both fear and strength, and with them, the Alliance had learned the greatest lesson of all. That survival was not just about fighting, it was about the will to endure, together.